What if I told you that in the dark, candlelit halls of medieval Europe, some of the most disturbing sexual behaviors were not only common, but legal, celebrated, and even enforced by the church? Let's go back to a world of burning torches, iron chains, and stone castles. The Middle Ages, a time often romanticized with tales of knights and honor, but behind those stories lies a far darker reality. As a historical storyteller, I'm here to guide you through the shadows of human behavior, specifically the disturbing and often horrifying sexual acts practiced and accepted during this time. And no, this isn't fantasy. This is all brutally true. At number 7, let's talk about the Droit du Seigneur, or the Lord's right. In feudal Europe, it was widely believed that nobles had the right to sleep with a serf's bride on her wedding night. The newlywed husband could do nothing but wait in silence while his wife was taken to the Lord's chamber. Although historians still debate how widespread this truly was, the fear of it was very real, and it reflected the twisted power structures of the time. Imagine starting your marriage by giving your wife to another man because the system demanded it. This wasn't just abuse, it was humiliation turned into law. Coming in at number 6 is the Church's obsession with sexual confession. By the 13th century, priests were required to ask detailed, invasive questions during confession. How often did you touch yourself? Did you climax? With whom? Where? When? Nothing was off limits. These weren't just spiritual inquiries, they were intrusive interrogations that could lead to punishment or penance. The Church saw every sexual thought as a battlefield for sin, and people lived in constant fear that even their dreams could land them in hell. It was spiritual surveillance wrapped in the name of morality. Number 5, the brutal punishment for bestiality. Yes, it happened, and yes, the punishments were terrifying. If a man was caught having sexual relations with an animal, he was often burned alive alongside the animal. The logic? Both were guilty of pollution. In one French village, a pig was dressed in human clothing and publicly executed by hanging, just to set an example. This wasn't just about stopping immoral acts, it was about using public violence to teach obedience. The more grotesque the punishment, the more memorable the lesson. Number 4 is a chilling practice called chastity by torture. Some women, especially nuns or noble daughters, were forced to wear iron chastity belts, sometimes from childhood. These belts weren't just uncomfortable, they were brutal. Sharp metal edges, no sanitation, and locked for years. Some belts had inner spikes that wounded the woman if she became aroused. These weren't symbolic, they were weapons. A woman's body wasn't hers. It belonged to her father, then her husband, or to God, and the belt was the key to keeping her under control. Number 3, let's talk about public penance for unmarried sex. If you were caught having sex outside marriage, your punishment wasn't private, it was public humiliation. People were forced to strip naked and walk through town while others jeered, spat, and threw rotten food. In some cases, they had to carry heavy stones or wear signs labeling them as fornicators. Imagine being 18, in love, and making a mistake, only to be paraded like a criminal in front of your entire village. Sex was weaponized, not to protect anyone, but to control behavior through fear. Number 2, now something rarely discussed. The Church's obsession with female sexuality. Women were blamed for almost every sexual sin. If a man was tempted, the Church taught that it was because a woman had seduced him, just by existing. Texts warned that a woman's body was a pit of sin, her gaze a trap, her hair the net of the devil. Some clergymen believed that simply looking at a woman too long could drive a man to madness. To keep men pure, Women were kept covered, confined, or silenced. Female desire? It was treated like a disease. And finally, at number 1, the most horrifying of all, trial by ordeal for sexual crimes. If a woman was accused of adultery, she might be forced to walk on burning coals or carry a red-hot iron bar in her bare hands. If her wounds healed clean, she was declared innocent. If not, guilty. This wasn't justice. It was torture disguised as divine will. In some regions, men suspected of infidelity faced trial by water, tied up and thrown into rivers. If they floated, they were guilty. If they sank, well, they drowned but were considered innocent. The logic was as deadly as it was absurd. We often imagine the past as more romantic, more innocent. But when you look closer, really closer, you find a world ruled not by love, but by fear, power, and pain. History isn't always beautiful, but it's always worth remembering.
You'd think things couldn't get darker than trial by fire or being burned alive next to a goat, but the medieval world had no shortage of imagination, especially when it came to punishing, distorting, and controlling sex. Because the truth is, sexuality in the Middle Ages wasn't just personal, it was political, religious, and deeply dangerous. Let's continue with a disturbing chapter that often gets erased from history books. The public use of sex as entertainment, especially during executions. In some regions, women accused of adultery, witchcraft, or promiscuity weren't just executed, they were stripped naked and paraded before their deaths. Their bodies were groped, mocked, even assaulted in front of cheering crowds. In the town squares of medieval Germany or France, sexual humiliation was part of the punishment, meant to cleanse the soul through shame. Executions weren't just about death, they were theater, and the audience demanded a show. In monasteries and nunneries, things were no better. Let's talk about secret sexual abuse behind religious walls. Some monks took vows of celibacy, but broke them in terrifying ways. Historical records, like those from the Chronicon Anglicanum, detail nuns forced into sex, pregnancies covered up, and unwanted babies drowned in wells behind abbeys. Church authorities often looked the other way, as long as scandal didn't reach the public. Inside, abuse festered. Outside, the image of holiness was preserved. The cloisters, quiet and serene from the outside, sometimes hid horrors no less brutal than a battlefield. In medieval law, especially under canon law, a woman who was raped often had to prove she fought back hard enough. If she didn't scream, didn't bleed, or, God forbid, if she became pregnant, she was sometimes accused of enjoying it. There are court records in England and Italy where women were punished for not resisting enough. Some were even forced to marry their rapists because that was seen as a way to restore honor. It's a chilling reminder. Back then, a woman's body was never really hers. It was a possession, first of her father, then of her husband, and always subject to the laws of men. Now we arrive at something almost too surreal to believe, the sexual torture of heretics. In the later Middle Ages, those accused of heresy were sometimes tortured not just for information, but for moral cleansing. Some inquisitors inserted spiked devices into genitalia. Others used heat, blades, and clamps on sexual organs, claiming that pleasure led to sin, so pain would lead to truth. Torture chambers in places like Spain and Italy were designed for both maximum agony and maximum shame. The goal wasn't just to hurt, it was to violate. Let's talk about one of the darkest symbols of male control, the punishment mask, specifically the scold's bridle. At first glance, it looks like an iron helmet, but inside was a small metal plate designed to press down on the tongue, sometimes with spikes. If a woman was labeled promiscuous, talkative, or rebellious, she might be forced to wear this in public, sometimes chained and walked through the street. She couldn't speak, couldn't swallow. Some died from infection, others from choking. All suffered in silence. The message was clear: speak less, desire less, obey. One of the strangest sexual fears of the time was demonic ejaculation. Yes, seriously. Clergy across Europe warned that women could become pregnant after having sex with demons in their dreams. The church labeled these entities Incubi for women and Succubi for men, claiming they would slip into your bed at night and steal your soul through sexual acts. Some people were even put on trial for these unholy unions. Imagine waking from a dream and being told it wasn't just a nightmare, but evidence that you'd sinned in your sleep. This wasn't mental illness, it was seen as supernatural crime. And finally, we reach one of the most heart-wrenching practices: the selling of children into sexual servitude, disguised as religious service or apprenticeship. Poor families, desperate and starving, would hand over their daughters to monasteries or wealthy nobles, hoping they'd be fed and sheltered. What often happened instead was they became servants, concubines, or victims, used, discarded, and forgotten. Many were never seen again. There was no justice, no record, no voice. Just silence, wrapped in prayers and hidden behind stone walls. So why does this matter today? Because we cannot understand how far we've come unless we look at how far we've fallen. The Middle Ages weren't just dark, they were designed to keep people in the dark. Sex was not a private act, it was a battlefield of control, of belief, of punishment. And while some of these horrors feel like distant history, the echoes are still there, in how we talk about shame, in how we judge others, in the laws we write. If you believe more people should know these truths, hit that like button, share this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Which of these shocked you the most? Let's talk history, let's talk honestly, and let's never forget.